The ship shuddered as the hum of the engines echoed through the cold silence of space. Captain Alara Voss stood at the command deck of the Vanguard, her fingers lightly grazing the polished surface of the console. Her eyes were fixed on the holographic map that flickered before her, an ancient signal, an enigma that had thrown the galaxy into chaos. The signal had been discovered by a deep space probe, a relic of an older time, and it wasn't just any signal. It was a map to something powerful, something that could change the balance of the galaxy forever. And now the Vanguard was racing toward its coordinates, its crew aware that every second counted. If they were the first to uncover its meaning, they could reshape the galaxy's future. If their enemies got there first, the consequences could be catastrophic. "We're approaching the source." Lieutenant Marco Juno's voice broke through her thoughts. His tone was professional, but there was a slight edge to it, a tension that matched Alara's own. "Should we prepare for any resistance?" Alara's fingers hovered over the comms panel. She knew that once they arrived, they weren't just dealing with an ancient mystery. They were about to face the deadliest forces in the galaxy. It wasn't just the Traxoth, the enigmatic, war-hungry alien race that had been lurking in the shadows of galactic space. It was Zelthar, the warlord with a reputation for crushing anyone who stood in his way. Rumors had spread quickly that he'd been aware of the signal before humanity had even decoded it. If he got there first, he'd claim whatever lay at the source without hesitation. The galaxy would feel the consequences. "No resistance yet," Marco added, his eyes scanning the radar. "But the signal's origin point is uncharted. Whatever's out there, Captain, it's not on any map." "We'll be ready for anything," Alara responded, trying to mask the unease in her voice. The crew needed confidence, not fear. As the Vanguard slipped deeper into the uncharted sector, Alara couldn't shake the feeling that the stars around them weren't just distant suns. They were a warning. The further they ventured into the unknown, the more the air seemed to thrum with unease, as though the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, a piercing alarm blared across the ship. "Captain, we've got incoming," Marco shouted, his voice suddenly panicked. "It's Zelthar's fleet. They found us." Alara's heart skipped a beat. They hadn't even reached the coordinates yet, and Zelthar's forces were already on their tail. He must have been tracking them, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Vanguard was a formidable ship, but against Zelthar's warship, the Dreadfang, they were outclassed. "All hands to battle stations," Alara commanded, her voice sharp and clear. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The crew scrambled into action, adrenaline flooding the ship. The faint glow of distant stars outside the viewport was interrupted by the dark silhouette of Zelthar's flagship. The Dreadfang was a behemoth, bristling with weapons designed for destruction. Zelthar had not come for diplomacy, he had come for war. "Captain, they're locking weapons," Marco called out urgently. "We need to fight back, or we'll be obliterated." Alara's mind raced. They had no choice but to fight. She turned to her tactical officer, Lieutenant Reika, who was already preparing the ship's defense systems. "Target their weak points," Alara ordered. "If we can disable their shields, we'll have a chance." The Vanguard fired its first volley, a burst of energy that barely scratched the surface of the Dreadfang's shields. Zelthar's response was swift and merciless. A barrage of plasma bolts hammered against the Vanguard, shaking the ship violently. Alara's grip tightened on the console. "We can't take much more of this," Reika warned. "We need to jump to hyperspace now." But as Alara prepared to make the call, the signal they had been chasing flared brightly on their scanners. It was close, very close. A twisted part of her felt that if they could just hold on a little longer, They might reach the source of the signal and unlock its secrets. "We hold," Alara said, her voice steel. "We fight for this discovery for humanity. Now fire everything we've got." With a defiant roar, the Vanguard unleashed its full firepower, striking the Dreadfang at its vulnerable points. The battle was only beginning, and Alara knew that whatever lay ahead would change everything, for better or worse. The battle raged on around them, the Vanguard's engines straining under the stress of combat. Alara gripped the armrests of her chair as the ship lurched with each hit from Zelthar's bombardment. Her mind raced with calculations and instincts. Every move mattered. Every decision was a gamble. The crew was giving everything they had, but the relentless barrage from the Dreadfang was pushing them to the edge. "We can't keep this up much longer, Captain," Marco shouted from his station. "Their firepower is too much for us to handle head-on." Alara's jaw clenched. They needed to buy time, just enough to reach the signal's origin point. If they could get close enough, they might have a chance to escape this deadly game with something of value. She turned to Rika, who was working feverishly to keep the ship in one piece. "Can we trigger a short-range jump?" Alara asked, her mind racing through the possibilities. "Maybe, but it's risky," Rika replied, eyes flicking to the readouts. "The Dreadfang has us locked into their weapons grid. If we jump, they'll track us, and we'll be caught before we can even escape the system. Then we'll make them think we're going in the opposite direction," Alara said, a dangerous idea forming in her mind. "Divert all auxiliary power to the engines. I'll time it right." Rika hesitated, then nodded. "Understood, Captain." Alara stood, her boots echoing on the metal floor as she walked to the tactical display. She felt the weight of her decisions pressing down on her as the ship continued to shudder from incoming fire. Zelthar's fleet was closing in, but she could feel that the coordinates, the signal they had been chasing, were almost within reach. They couldn't afford to lose this opportunity. "All hands, brace for evasive maneuver," Alara commanded, her voice unwavering despite the chaos around her. "Prepare to disengage from combat and reroute all power to jump." The crew responded in unison, their movements fluid, synchronized. Alara's heart pounded as she watched the readouts. The Dreadfang was targeting them again, no surprise there, but with a deft flick of the controls, Alara sent the Vanguard into a sharp, unpredictable roll. The ship bucked violently as the weapons fire from the enemy fleet missed by a hair's breadth. "Now!" she shouted. Rika slammed a button, and the ship's engines roared to life, sending them into a sudden burst of speed. Zelthar's fleet was thrown off balance, momentarily confused. They had to act fast. The Vanguard tore through space, rocketing toward the coordinates of the signal at full throttle. The stars outside the viewport became streaks of light as they tore through hyperspace, the ship humming with the energy of their daring escape. Alara glanced at the display, watching as the signal grew stronger, clearer. They were close. But as they hurtled through the vastness of space, the battle was far from over. Alara knew they would be pursued. Zelthar would never give up until he had them in his grasp. Even if they escaped for now, the warlord had an army, resources, and a drive to conquer whatever stood in his way. The closer they got to the source of the signal, the more she realized the stakes were not just personal. They were galactic. A sudden, sharp beep interrupted her thoughts. The signal was no longer just a map. It was a beacon. A glowing sphere of energy flickered to life on the edge of their scanners, a faint, pulsing object hidden in a cloud of debris, a relic of another age. "There it is," Marco whispered, awe in his voice. Alara's breath caught in her chest. She stared at the glowing sphere on the monitor. It wasn't just an artifact. It was a key. The map had led them to it, but they had no idea what it could unlock. It was an ancient, unknown technology, possibly older than any known civilization. But now they were facing the unknown, and the galaxy had no idea what they were about to unleash. As they closed in on the artifact, a dark shadow passed over the signal on the screen. Something, or someone, was waiting for them. The hairs on Alara's neck stood up. She wasn't sure if it was Zelthar's fleet or something far more dangerous. But in that moment, she knew one thing for certain. The galaxy was about to change forever. The Vanguard drifted to a halt near the artifact, its massive form silhouetted against a nebula of swirling blues and purples. The glowing sphere pulsed steadily, its rhythm almost hypnotic, as if it were alive. Alara stood on the command deck, her gaze fixed on the display. The artifact hung there, serene and unassuming, yet exuding a presence that was anything but ordinary. Scanners are picking up faint energy signatures around it, Marco reported, his brow furrowed. But it's strange. The readings don't match any known technology. Alara nodded, her fingers gripping the edge of the console. Could it be booby-trapped? Unclear, but we should assume so. Reikat chimed in from the tactical station. Something like this wouldn't be left unprotected for long. As if to confirm her words, an alarm blared, cutting through the tense silence. Marco's hands flew across the controls. "We've got company, Captain. Multiple contacts inbound." The viewport flickered, and then they saw them, sleek, black ships emerging from the shadows of the debris field. Their designs were alien, their angular shapes glinting menacingly in the dim light. Unlike Zelthar's war fleet, these ships moved with precision, like predators stalking their prey. "Who the hell are they?" Alara asked, her voice low but firm. "They're not broadcasting any identification," Marco replied. "But their tech, it's advanced, way beyond what we've seen, even from the Traxoth." Rika's face darkened. "Guardians, maybe. If this artifact is as old as it seems, it might have its own defenses, or those who protect it." The black ships didn't fire immediately. Instead, they formed a tight formation around the artifact, their movements synchronized. It was a clear message. Stay back. Alara weighed her options. They couldn't leave without investigating the artifact, but engaging an unknown enemy, especially one so advanced, was a risk they might not survive. Her thoughts were interrupted by another alert. "Zelthar's fleet is closing in," Marco warned. "We've got minutes before they catch up." Alara's mind raced. They were caught between two threats, the mysterious Guardians and Zelthar's war fleet. The artifact was the key to everything, but claiming it would ignite a battle on two fronts. Yet, retreat wasn't an option. Humanity's future depended on what lay within that glowing sphere. "Open a channel to the unknown ships," Alara ordered. "Let's see if we can negotiate." Marco nodded and activated the comms. Static filled the air before a cold, mechanical voice responded. "You do not belong here. Leave or face annihilation." "This artifact is of interest to all sentient species," Alara replied, keeping her tone steady. "We seek knowledge, not conflict." The silence that followed was deafening. Then the voice returned, sharper, more menacing. "The knowledge you seek is forbidden. To approach is to die." The black ships began to move, their weapons powering up. Alara's heart sank. Diplomacy wasn't an option. "Battle stations," she barked. "Prepare to engage." The Vanguard's weapons came online, glowing with raw energy. As the black ships closed in, the crew braced for the fight of their lives. But just as the first shots were exchanged, a massive surge of energy erupted from the artifact, throwing both the Vanguard and the enemy ships into chaos. What was that? Rika shouted, gripping her station. Alara stared at the artifact, her eyes wide. It wasn't just pulsing anymore. It was glowing brighter, its rhythm quickening. The sphere seemed to come alive, as if reacting to the conflict around it. "Captain," Marco said, his voice trembling. "The artifact. It's scanning us." Alara's gaze snapped at him. "Scanning us?" "Yes," he confirmed. "And it's broadcasting something. Coordinates. A message." Before Alara could respond, the artifact released another burst of energy, this time enveloping the Vanguard in a blinding light. The crew shielded their eyes as the ship's systems flickered. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the light vanished. When Alara opened her eyes, she realized the Vanguard was no longer in the same place. The debris field, the black ships, even Zelthar's fleet, all were gone. Instead, they were adrift in the middle of a vast empty void, with stars that felt unfamiliar. "Where are we?" she whispered, dread creeping into her voice. Marco's hands flew across the controls, his face pale. I don't know. The star charts don't match anything in our database." Alara stared at the glowing artifact, which now floated silently in the void, its energy subdued. Whatever they had unlocked, it had taken them somewhere, and whatever waited for them here was a mystery far more dangerous than anything they'd left behind. The silence in the void was oppressive. No debris fields, no hostile ships, just an expanse of space so vast and empty it seemed to swallow the Vanguard whole. Alara stood frozen, staring at the artifact as it floated near their ship, its glow dim but steady, like the last embers of a fire. "Captain," Rika said, her voice strained, "we're not in known space. There's no sign of the Zelthar fleet or the Guardians. It's as if we've been moved outside the galaxy itself." Alara's heart raced. The implications were staggering. The Vanguard wasn't just lost. It was somewhere that had never been charted, a place entirely removed from the familiar cosmos. "Is the artifact stable?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unease creeping into her thoughts. Marco examined his monitors. "It's emitting faint energy readings, but nothing like before. Whatever it did to move us here, it's dormant now." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The artifact had been a beacon, a guide, but now it felt like a trap. Before Alara could respond, another alert echoed through the bridge. This time, it was the proximity sensors. "Contacts," Marco said sharply. "Multiple, but they're not ships. They're structures." The display lit up, revealing colossal shapes drifting in the void. They were ancient, monolithic, and utterly alien. Massive towers of blackened metal stretched into the darkness, adorned with glowing glyphs that pulsed faintly, as though alive. Some resembled spires, others like gargantuan rings, and all were arranged around a single immense structure that dwarfed everything else. "Is it a station?" Rika asked, her tone a mixture of awe and dread. "It's more than a station," Marco said, his voice trembling. "The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever it is, it's active." Alara stepped forward, her eyes locked on the display. "Bring us closer." Slowly. The Vanguard edged toward the central structure, its lights cutting through the shadows. As they approached, faint symbols began to appear on their monitors. They shifted and rearranged themselves, forming patterns that felt strangely deliberate. "It's trying to communicate," Marco said. "But the language, it's like nothing we've seen before." Can we decipher it? Alara asked. I'm working on it, Marco replied, his fingers flying over the controls. But it's complex, almost like it's alive. As the crew worked, a sudden hum resonated through the ship. The lights on the alien structure flared brighter, and a beam of energy shot out, enveloping the Vanguard. The ship shuddered, but the crew remained unharmed. It's scanning us, Rika said, gripping her console. Every system, every life form. Alara's stomach tightened. Whatever intelligence controlled this place, it was aware of them, and it wasn't stopping at observation. The artifact on board their ship began to glow again, responding to the alien energy. Captain, Marco said urgently, the artifact is transmitting something back to the structure. Before anyone could react, a voice, not mechanical, but deep and resonant, filled the ship. It wasn't transmitted through the comms, it was inside their minds. You have brought the key to the threshold. The crew froze, exchanging panicked glances. The voice continued, calm but commanding. Long has it been since the key was wielded. You stand before the Nexus Eternal, the cradle of what came before. Speak your purpose. Why have you come? Alara's throat was dry, but she stepped forward, her voice firm. We came seeking answers. Knowledge about the artifact and its origins. We didn't mean to intrude. The voice paused, as if considering her words. Then it spoke again. The key is not mere knowledge. It is power. A power that shaped the stars and shattered them. Your kind is untested, yet you stand at the precipice. Choose wisely. Step forward, or turn back. The beam of energy faded, and the Nexus fell silent. On the display, a pathway illuminated, leading into the heart of the structure. Captain, Rika said softly, this might be the opportunity of a lifetime, or a trap. Alara took a deep breath. They had risked everything to reach this point. Whatever the artifact was, whatever the Nexus Eternal represented, it held answers that could change humanity's fate. Prepare an away team, she said firmly. We're going in. The airlock hissed open, and the away team stepped cautiously onto the illuminated platform, extending into the heart of the Nexus Eternal. Alara led the team, her boots echoing faintly against the alien metal beneath them. Behind her were Rika, Marco, and 2 security officers, their weapons lowered but ready. The interior of the structure was breathtaking. Vast, spiraling columns rose into an unseen ceiling, and the walls shimmered with holographic glyphs that shifted and pulsed like a heartbeat. The light was dim but organic, casting an otherworldly glow that seemed to seep into their very beings. This place feels alive, Marco murmured, his voice tinged with awe. It's more than alive, Rika said, her eyes scanning the walls. It's aware. I can feel it watching us. Alara felt it too, a presence, ancient and immeasurable, as if the Nexus itself was judging their every step. She tightened her grip on her sidearm, her resolve hardening. Stay alert. We don't know what we're dealing with. As they advanced, the pathway led to a massive circular chamber. At its center hovered a glowing orb, larger and brighter than the artifact they'd brought aboard the Vanguard. The orb pulsed in rhythm with the glyphs on the walls, its energy filling the room with a tangible hum. Captain, I'm getting high-frequency readings from that orb, Marco said, his scanner beeping furiously. It's broadcasting. Something. Data, maybe. Or a warning, Rika added grimly. Before Alara could respond, the orb flared, and a figure materialized before them. It was humanoid, but its form shimmered like a projection, its features fluid and indistinct. Its eyes glowed with the same light as the orb, and its voice resonated in their minds. "Welcome, bearers of the key. You have reached the threshold. Few have walked this path. Fewer still have returned." The team tensed, but Alara stepped forward. "We came seeking answers. About the artifact, about the Nexus. What is this place?" The figure tilted its head slightly, as if weighing her words. "The Nexus Eternal is the repository of the first civilization. Long ago, we harnessed the keys to shape the galaxy, to build and to destroy. The artifact you possess is one such key, a fragment of our legacy." Alara's mind raced. The first civilization was the stuff of myths, whispered in the darkest corners of the galaxy. If this was true, they were standing in the remnants of a power that had shaped the universe itself. Marco stepped forward hesitantly. Why was the key left behind? Why now? The figure's glow dimmed slightly, as if in sorrow. The keys were abandoned after the fall, when our arrogance consumed us. Now only echoes remain, and the keys choose their bearers. You are untested, yet you hold the fate of your kind. Rika's hand hovered near her weapon. What happens if we take the key's power? It will awaken potential within you and your people, but it will also awaken those who would see you destroyed. The choice is yours. Embrace the burden, or leave the threshold. Alara's heart pounded. Humanity needed a fighting chance against the Zelthar and the threats beyond. But wielding such power came with risks she couldn't fully understand. "Captain," Marco said quietly, "this could change everything. But if it falls into the wrong hands..." Alara turned to the figure. "What happens if we refuse?" The figure's light dimmed further. "Then the key will sleep once more, and you will leave unchanged. But know this, without the key, your kind will not survive what is to come." The chamber grew silent, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. Alara closed her eyes, her mind racing. The key was humanity's hope, but it was also a Pandora's box. Whatever she chose, there would be no turning back. Finally, she opened her eyes, her voice firm. "We accept the burden. Humanity will rise to meet whatever comes." The figure nodded, its glow intensifying. "Then the key shall be yours. Prepare, for the path ahead will test the very core of your existence." The orb pulsed, and a surge of energy filled the chamber. The team shielded their eyes as the light engulfed them, searing into their minds and bodies. When it faded, Alara felt different, stronger, sharper, as if something dormant had been awakened. The figure's voice echoed one last time. "Go forth, bearers of the key, and remember, power demands sacrifice." As they turned to leave, the path behind them began to shift, leading them back to the vanguard. But Alara couldn't shake the feeling that their true trial was only beginning. The vanguard thrummed with unfamiliar energy as the away team returned. The ship's systems flickered momentarily, then stabilized, brighter and more responsive than before. Alara stepped onto the bridge, her movements purposeful but weighted with the gravity of what had just transpired. The artifact, no longer dormant, now pulsed with a steady rhythm in its containment field, its glow matching the energy signature of the Nexus Eternal. "Status report," Alara commanded, scanning the room. Marco, still at his station, looked up. "All systems are operating at 120% efficiency, Captain. The artifact's energy is coursing through the ship. It's like it's become part of the vanguard." Rika crossed her arms, her brow furrowed. "Or it's taken control. Can we even be sure this is an upgrade and not a leash?" Alara held Rika's gaze. "If it wanted to control us, it wouldn't have given us the choice back there. Whatever this is, we're going to use it." Before anyone could respond, an alarm blared through the ship. Marco's fingers flew over his console. Incoming signals. Multiple ships dropping out of FTL. Zelthar warships. Alara's stomach tightened. The Zelthar had found them. "How many?" she asked. Marco's voice was grim. "At least a dozen. And they've already powered their weapons." Rika spun toward Alara. "They've been tracking us. They must have followed the artifact's energy signature." Alara nodded sharply. "Battle stations. Shields up, and prepare for evasive maneuvers." The crew moved like a well-oiled machine, but Alara felt the tension rising. The Vanguard was a capable ship, but it was outclassed by the Zelthar fleet. Yet, as the enemy ships closed in, the artifact's glow intensified. The ship's A spoke in a calm, almost alien tone. Defensive protocols activated. Artifact energy integration at 65%. "What the hell does that mean?" Rika demanded. Before anyone could answer, the ship reacted. The artifact's energy surged through the Vanguard, and new systems activated on the control panels. Marco stared at his screen in disbelief. "Captain, we've got enhanced shield arrays, energy lances, and something called a hyperflux cannon. These weren't in the ship's specs. Is it safe to use?" Alara asked. Marco hesitated, then nodded. "If the artifact's integrating with the ship, it's responding to us. It wants us to survive." Alara turned to the helm. "Target the lead Zelthar cruiser. Let's see what this ship can do." The Vanguard moved like a predator, its newly enhanced engines propelling it with unprecedented speed. The Zelthar fleet fired, their plasma bolts tearing toward the ship, but the Vanguard's shields absorbed the impacts with ease. "Return fire," Alara commanded. The energy lances activated, streaking across the void and piercing the Zelthar cruiser's hull. Explosions rippled through the enemy ship as it broke apart. The bridge erupted in cheers, but Alara's focus remained razor-sharp. "Don't get comfortable," she said. "They're regrouping." As the Zelthar ships adjusted their formation, the artifact pulsed again. The A's voice returned. "Hyperflux cannon charged. Recommend immediate deployment." "Do it," Alara ordered. The ship's forward array glowed blindingly bright as the hyperflux cannon discharged. A wave of energy rippled through space, engulfing 2 more Zelthar ships. Their shields collapsed, and their hulls disintegrated in the blast. 3 down, 9 to go, Rika muttered, her grip tight on her console. But the Zelthar weren't retreating. Instead, their remaining ships began to form a perimeter, emitting a strange, resonating frequency. Alara's eyes narrowed. "What are they doing?" Marco's console beeped furiously. "They're jamming the artifact's signal, trying to disrupt its integration with the ship." The lights on the Vanguard flickered, and the artifact's glow dimmed slightly. Alara clenched her fists. The artifact had given them power, but it was still vulnerable. "Options?" she asked. Marco hesitated. "If we boost the artifact's energy output manually, it might override their interference. But it's risky. If we push it too far, we could overload the ship." Alara's jaw tightened. The choice was clear. Risk everything or be destroyed. "Do it. Push the artifact to full capacity." Marco nodded, his hands flying over the controls. The ship trembled as the artifact's glow surged, brighter and brighter. The Zelthar jamming frequencies faltered, their formation breaking as they scrambled to compensate. "Fire all weapons," Alara shouted. The Vanguard unleashed a storm of energy, tearing through the Zelthar fleet. Ship after ship erupted into flames, until only silence remained. The crew let out a collective sigh of relief, but Alara knew this was far from over. The artifact pulsed one final time, and the A's voice returned. Integration complete. Artifact energy at 100%. Hostile forces eliminated, awaiting next directive. Alara exhaled, her resolve hardening. They had won this battle, but the artifact had made one thing clear. Their journey was only beginning, and with every step forward, the stakes would grow higher. The aftermath of the battle left the vanguard adrift in silence. The bridge crew was still catching their breath, but Alara's mind churned. They had narrowly survived, but the cost of wielding the artifact's power was becoming evident. Each victory pulled them further into the web of the Nexus Eternal, a responsibility they were only beginning to understand. "Captain," Rika said, her voice breaking through Alara's thoughts. "Incoming transmission. It's encrypted, but it's not Zelthar." Alara straightened. "Put it through." The main display flickered to life, revealing a cloaked figure seated in a dimly lit chamber. Behind them, faint symbols glowed on an ornate wall, a design eerily similar to the glyphs inside the Nexus Eternal. The figure's voice was calm, but carried an undeniable weight of authority. "Captain Alara Tren, bearer of the key, you have made yourself known to the galaxy." Alara narrowed her eyes. "And who exactly am I speaking to?" "I am Seren, envoy of the Council of Shadows. We are the stewards of the Nexus Eternal, watchers of those who dare to wield its power." Rika scoffed quietly. "Stewards. You've done a stellar job keeping it hidden." Seren ignored her, focusing on Alara. "The power you have claimed is ancient and dangerous. Few have been granted the privilege to use it. Fewer still have wielded it wisely. The artifact tests its bearers, and you are no exception." Alara folded her arms. "If you're here to lecture us, save it. We didn't ask for this responsibility, but we're not backing down. Humanity needs every advantage we can get." Seren's head tilted slightly, as if amused. "Bold words, Captain. But power always comes with a price. The key has awakened something far greater than your enemies. Forces older than the Zelthar are stirring, and they will not tolerate your intrusion into the Nexus's domain." Marco turned from his console. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple hyperspace signatures inbound, bigger than anything we've seen before." Alara's stomach dropped. "How long?" "Minutes," Marco replied grimly. Seren's voice cut through the tension. "The Zelthar were merely the beginning. What approaches now are the Reclaimers, remnants of the first civilization, determined to erase any who dare to touch their legacy. You have two choices: face them alone, or join the Council and gain the knowledge to survive." "Join you." Alara's tone was sharp. "And surrender the artifact?" "No deal." Seren's expression didn't change. "The artifact's power is not yours to command. It belongs to the Nexus. But the Council can show you how to wield it without destroying yourself and your people." Rika glared at the screen. "Sounds like a leash to me." Seren's gaze shifted to Rika. "Then face the Reclaimers without guidance and see how far your defiance takes you." The hyperspace alarms blared louder. Marco's voice was tight. "They're here." Alara turned to Seren, her jaw clenched. "If we join the Council, what guarantees do we have?" Seren's image shimmered. "The Nexus does not make guarantees, Captain. It only offers opportunity. The choice is yours." The screen went dark, leaving the crew staring at one another. The ship trembled as the Reclaimers' massive vessels emerged from hyperspace, dwarfing anything they had faced before. Their hulls gleamed with ancient designs, and their energy signatures were overwhelming. Alara's voice cut through the chaos. Battle stations. Marco, prepare to fire the artifact's enhanced systems. Rika, get me every ounce of power we have. Rika hesitated. Captain, if we push the artifact again without understanding it. We don't have time for understanding, Alara snapped. We fight or we die. The crew scrambled as the Reclaimers unleashed their first volley. The Vanguard's shields absorbed the impact, but it was clear they wouldn't last long. The artifact pulsed, its light flickering erratically, as if unsure of the battle ahead. Seren's voice echoed faintly in Alara's mind. The key chooses its bearer, but even the strongest bearer cannot stand alone. Alara closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, the weight of the decision crushing her. The Council's offer loomed like a shadow over her thoughts. Were they trading one enemy for another? Or was this the only path to survival? She opened her eyes, her voice steady. Hold the line. We're not done yet. The Vanguard surged forward, its crew bracing for the battle of their lives. The artifact's glow intensified, a beacon in the void, as if it too was preparing for the storm. The Vanguard trembled under the assault of the Reclaimers' ancient firepower. Shields buckled, and the crew braced as sparks flew across the bridge. Yet, amidst the chaos, the artifact pulsed brighter, its rhythm syncing with the very heartbeat of the ship. Shields at 10%, Captain, Marco shouted. We're out of time. Alara stood firm, her gaze locked on the massive Reclaimer, dreadnought looming ahead. Its weapons charged for another volley, each glowing port promising annihilation, but she refused to yield. Rika, she barked. Redirect everything into the artifact. Overcharge it. Rika hesitated, her hands hovering over the console. If we do that, the artifact could destabilize, or worse, take us with it. Alara's voice cut through her doubts. We don't have a choice. Trust it. With a sharp nod, Rika initiated the overcharge. The artifact's light grew blinding, bathing the bridge in a crimson glow. The ship's A spoke, its voice no longer mechanical, but almost alive. Integration complete. Unlocking full capabilities. Initiating Nexus sequence. The Vanguard lurched forward, propelled by an unseen force. The Reclaimer's weapons fired, but the bolts dissolved mid-flight, absorbed into a shimmering barrier surrounding the ship. Gasps filled the bridge as the artifact's energy expanded outward, encompassing the entire battlefield. What's happening? Marco asked, his voice trembling. The artifact is rewriting the rules, Rika murmured, awestruck. It's bending space itself. The Reclaimer fleet hesitated, their formations faltering. But the dreadnought pressed forward, its weapons recalibrating to counter the artifact's energy. It launched a single massive energy lance, aimed directly at the Vanguard. Evasive maneuvers, Alara shouted. But before the helm could react, the artifact pulsed violently. The lance froze mid-flight, suspended in a web of crackling crimson energy. Then, with a deafening roar, the artifact redirected the energy back toward the dreadnought. The explosion that followed tore through the enemy ship, its ancient hull disintegrating in a flash of light. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Alara raised a hand. It's not over yet. She was right. The remaining Reclaimer ships regrouped, their commanders no longer underestimating the Vanguard. The artifact pulsed again, and the ship's A spoke. Final protocol available. Nexus ascension requires full synchronization. Warning: irreparable consequences for user and vessel. Alara's brow furrowed. Define irreparable. The AI hesitated, a strange, almost human pause. User and vessel will transcend current physical forms. Legacy will be preserved. Survival probability 92%. Marco turned, disbelief etched across his face. Transcend? What does that even mean? Rika's voice was tight. It means we stop being who we are. The Reclaimers began another assault, their ships moving with renewed precision. Alara knew they had no time to debate. Her crew looked to her, their faces filled with trust and fear. "Captain," Rika said softly, "if we do this, we might not come back." Alara met her gaze. "We didn't come this far to turn back." She stepped toward the artifact, its glow now pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Placing her hand on its surface, she felt a surge of energy unlike anything before. Memories of Earth, of humanity's struggle, of the countless sacrifices that brought them to this moment, flooded her mind. "Activate Nexus Ascension," she said firmly. The artifact's light consumed the ship, expanding outward in a cascade of energy that enveloped the Reclaimer fleet. The Vanguard dissolved into pure energy, its crew feeling neither pain nor fear, but a profound sense of connection, to the ship, to each other, and to the artifact itself. In an instant, the battlefield was silent. The Reclaimer ships vanished, their ancient technology no match for the artifact's unleashed power. In their place, a new structure emerged, a massive, glowing nexus that shimmered with the colors of every star. Far across the galaxy, sensors picked up the event. Nations and empires turned their eyes to the skies, whispering of humanity's impossible victory. And deep within the nexus, the crew of the Vanguard awoke, no longer bound by flesh and bone, but as something greater, eternal guardians of the Crimson Legacy, their names destined to echo across the stars for all time.